I'm sure most of you have at least heard of it. It started out as, let's see, about 7 years ago. There were two former Google employees that started the business, and over the years, originally they started out as just offering a weather insurance product for any business, and I think they still would, but now they pretty much totally focus on agriculture, since weather greatly affects agriculture. And you may have heard of like the weather bill several years ago. That was a product that you could just get insurance just for strictly rainfall. If you don't get X amount of rainfall during the month of August, then they pay you X amount. 2 or 3 years ago they came out with total weather insurance, which took all of this agronomic modeling and weather simulation and everything into play in order to calculate for payments. So that's when we first started working with the Climate Corporation, just because we deal on the crop insurance side. We had customers asking to get the weather insurance product, and so that's when we got on board with the Climate Corporation as an agency. And also this year they are offering multi-peril crop insurance. So same type of company as like Great American or NAU, you've maybe heard of years ago, Acre National, they got bought out by NAU, but that type of company, they're a crop insurance AIP. So they are a technology-driven company. Obviously, these are former Google employees. They're based out of San Francisco in Silicon Valley, right along with the Googles and the Apples. They've hired guys away from Google, I'm sure. And so as we go through this, you can just imagine the intense amount of data and data processing that goes on behind this, and all the mathematics that comes into play. It's some pretty amazing technology. So with Climate Basic, basically what that is just weather information and past weather. We've already seen that. And in the past couple of years, they've been working with the total weather insurance product, and in order to calculate their premiums and payments and so forth, they were using thousands of weather simulations and so forth. And so then they're like, hey, why don't we make this into another product? We're already basically kind of able to project yields and see what's going on out in these fields. Why don't we make this available to the farmer, because it can be very valuable information. I was at a conference about 3 years ago when I first started this job down in Springfield, and a U of I professor by the name of Fred Belo had a talk on the 300 bushel corn yield goal, and what he was doing is he was separating the components that make up yield and kind of calculating a percentage for each component. And he said weather was 27% and nitrogen was 26%. Hybrid was right underneath that. Previous crop, tillage. Climate Pro takes a lot of that into account. Obviously the weather is tied with every advisory. We're also looking at nitrogen. We're using previous crop. So I really think that this is something that could really explode. It's a first in the marketplace. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on it, seeing how it works. But I think there's a lot of potential here to value really any size operation. What the Climate Pro includes is 6 advisories: the planting advisor, nitrogen advisor, pest and disease, harvest, the variable rate, and also revenue. And what Climate Pro is using, we're doing weather monitoring. So we're using Doppler radar. It's using half-mile grids for sensing the temperature, I believe. We're also using nearby weather stations to cross-check that data. And we're also obviously doing agronomic modeling, since we're tracking the growth stage of the plant throughout the year. And every day, Climate Pro is doing 10,000 weather simulations. So there's a tremendous amount of data and a tremendous amount of simulations that's coming into play. So with each of these advisors, they are all dynamic, which basically means every time you look at it, it updates to the most current advice. It doesn't just give you one advisor on May 30th for pest and disease and then you're done. It keeps updating to the most current based on their weather simulation. So based on their studies, they have used $5 per corn commodity, $5 per bushel commodity price for corn, and based on their studies, they're saying we can increase per acre profitability by $100 an acre. There's a website you can go to see how they came up with that estimation. I believe we'll see that website towards the end of this slideshow. Some of the main points with Climate Pro is it's going to help you plan with confidence. I guess I look at it as it's an advisor. So some guys have marketing advisors. Maybe you use them sometimes and other times you don't. But I guess you still have the confidence, or you just find somewhat of a peace in just having someone giving you advice. One of the big things is we're wanting to anticipate issues before yield is actually reduced. So that's the whole point of these advisories, is to try to be proactive instead of reactive. We want to be out there getting nitrogen on that field before you're actually seeing the crop turn yellow. So in the end, hopefully it's going to maximize our efficiency and time and budget. Because another thing, I think as far as with the efficiency part, with all these advisories, it basically pushes your most critical fields to the top. So it tells you where you need to put your attention to first, and you'll see what I mean by that in the next slides here. This is just an overview of all the 6 advisors. I'm actually just going to skip through that. Right here is the variable rate advisor. I guess in my opinion, this probably has the most tangible value of all these, because it actually gives you something to look at. What it gives you is 4 satellite images in season, and then it also gives you 3 historical images. So like for this coming year, it would give you historical images from 2013, 2012, and 2011. And then approximately every 30 days, it's going to be taking satellite images. It's not going to be exactly 30 days because it's going to take the images at the time where there's the least amount of cloud cover, so that way it gets as clear of an image as possible. They've tried to make everything as usable and as easy as possible. I mean, it's a lot of information, and so they try to make it as easy to use as possible. So these are just showing the tips. So the first time you open it up, it'll show you these tips, and it'll show the button up here, close these tips. And then when you hit that button to close them out, this is what it'll look like, just a normal screen. If you want to bring those tips back up to see what everything is, just hit the button again. They have this in most all of the different screens on Climate Pro. So this right here is a satellite image for just an example field. It's called Dad's Farm, which we're going to be following through all these advisors. It's 158 acres, silty clay loam. What they are generating here off of these satellite images is a climate crop index, which, as I understand it, they're using 5 spectral bands of infrared technology, where NDVI is like 2 or 3. Bryce, maybe you know better, but I know we're able to pull in some more spectral bands of the infrared technology to get a little better sense on the crop health of those plants. Now, we are taking this with Rapid Eye satellite technology, which is the highest resolution we can get with the satellite. It's 5 meter by 5 meter resolution. I know there's other services out there that offer like an airplane flyover that go to a higher resolution. The reason why they have decided not to offer that service and with the Climate Pro is we're just trying to focus on data that is actually actionable. We could go higher resolution than 5 meter by 5 meter, but is it actually possible for you to go out and actually nurse 5 plants out in the field? Where we are today, we don't have the technology to do that. So we're just trying to get a general idea of the variability out in the field. So we feel that with the 5 meter by 5 meter resolution, it's going to do a good job for us. And then right here, you can see the View Historical Images button, where I bring up historical images. It says right here what date the image was taken. And then right here is a pin that you can just drag out to that field. And if you just want to check out this problem spot right here, just drag a pin out to that spot. You'll be able to take your iPad out to that field, and it'll direct you right to that pin, so you know exactly where to look. And then you can snap pictures and look at it from there. Or you can put that pin in there and call whoever your advisors are, Guide Early Bird, or whoever sold the seed. Give them your username and password. They can go out there with that app, log in as you, and they'll be able to go right out to that spot and take pictures for you as well. So you can kind of do it either way. You can also, snap a picture, share it with him through email or however you wish. Another very useful thing, in my opinion, with the Variable Rate Advisor is they have an algorithm built up in their system where as soon as they get these new satellite images that come in, it senses the variability of each field and it assigns a percentage. So it says Dad's Farm is 67% variable, Mary's 40 is 50%. And so then you can organize it by variability, and so your most variable fields will come to the top, and it just helps you prioritize, back to the efficiency part of this. It just helps you be more efficient and spend time where it's most needed. So right here, as we talked, once you peg a pin out in that field, you can go out there, snap pictures. These are just some examples of taking pictures of the corn with different pests or disease or lack of nitrogen, whatever it is. And this is looking at the details on that. There's the share button where you can share it with people. and so forth. And again, whenever you snap those pictures, just automatically in the background it's tagging the weather information behind that. We've already kind of covered this with the climate basic part. This is just talking about notes. So the notes will be stored under each field, every activity you did for that field, which then later you'll be able to print off reports. So an end of season report, chemical audit, field inputs, 578s, acreage reports, a landlord report so they can see everything you did on that field. So the whole goal here is you can make one central spot where you can record all of your field activities and so forth. Application, what we would have done without using the Climate Pro, or what we plan on doing without taking Climate Pro into consideration. You type that in over here, and so on this graph it's showing the available nitrogen for the Climate Pro recommendation, and then the custom nitrogen practice. So what you would normally do compared to what they are recommending that you do. So off to the right here, you have these 4 different options to choose from to look at the graph. So right now we're just on available nitrogen, like what you just mentioned with the denitrification and crop use and so forth. We'll see that on the next slide. But right here is just showing the available nitrogen, so you can see here on June 9, you're going to apply 40 pounds per acre, which is what you have typed in up here. And so you can see the nitrogen bumped up in that spot right around the V7 stage. And then it dives down, and then right around R2 to R3 is when you're out of nitrogen. With the Pro recommendation, they recommended to apply it at June 25 with 57 pounds per acre, which then takes you all the way through to the end of maturity. So here's the next screen, which is kind of the invert of the last screen we just looked at. So it just shows how it lost that nitrogen and what that was comprised of. So it just shows you the legend up here. We have crop use, leaching, denitrification, volatilization. And so you can see what each of those are made up of and how much. This here is showing the whole farm view. So before, we were under Dad's field and we had selected the details tab right there. So we're looking on the details for Dad's field. Now we're just looking at the whole farm view, which is showing 10 Pro fields, and it had bumped this alert saying that 3 fields need a nitrogen application within 2 weeks. So when you open up your Climate Pro account, that's what it told you. So it just shows here the available in, what they're recommending on when to apply nitrogen, and then how much, and then it's showing the next workable date to apply it based on the weather and soil moisture and so forth. And then down here is showing the fields that are good with nitrogen at that time. So we're going to have to keep moving here to try to stay ahead of the time, but next is the planning advisor part. This is where you input your relative maturity of the hybrids that you have purchased for this year. You can actually do this right now. I mean, if you've already purchased a bundle, you can go in, sign your Climate Pro fields, and right away you'll have access to the planning advisor, so you can kind of play around with it. Here again, I'm just going to skip ahead to the next slide. So we're on Dad's farm, same type of thing as before. We've got the Pro recommendation over here, and then the custom scenario over here. So we're planning on doing 92-day corn, 32,000 the population on this field. Pro recommendation is 100-day corn, and so right here it's just showing the projected yield curve. So it's about a 20 bushel advantage based on their projected yield by planting earlier, between April 14 to 18 instead of 18 to 19, and planting a longer day corn. And then over here is where you can see all the different risks, which is why they're giving that pro recommendation. So freeze risk, drought, heat, and soil temperature. This is just showing a screen on the freeze risk. And then this here again is showing the whole farm view for all 10 of the pro fields. Before we were just in the details tab. Right here is showing a blue box for what did you plant. Now, if you don't have a 2020, which I don't think any of you are probably not going to have a 2020, but if you want it, you would have to manually input it. Otherwise, this would automatically be populated. So on here to pest and disease. So what we're taking into account with pest and disease is earworm, rootworm, cutworm, and soybean aphids on your soybean fields. Basically what we're doing here is we're taking all the university data that you can access on like the U of I website, all the data they've come up with for all these different pests at different growth stages and different soil types and so forth. It's automatically interpreting all that information for you and just putting it right down on a field level basis for sure.
So
on the screen it looks like
so up there in orange it says 4 fields have a potential rootworm larva hatch
occurring within a week.
So this is not necessarily telling you if you should do an application or not. This is basically telling you where are, according to the data that's been collected, according to the conditions and other input that's been given to the system from surrounding areas, are the conditions right for there to be a high level of pest. It's ordering the fields from the most at risk to the least at risk. So basically the value of this one is I've got 25 fields. Well, I got a scout. So I drive around today, I go look at 10. I drive around tomorrow, I go look at 10. It rains the next 3 days, I go back and I look at the other 5. This is basically saying you have 4 fields that have the conditions right and are highest risk, go to those 4 first. And then you look at it, you say, have I met the threshold at which I want to pull the trigger?
Yep.
So it's not going to sit here and say, based on what you've done, you should do this and whatnot. It's basically alerting you to where the highest likelihood of damage is or potential risk, and then it's up to you to go check that out and make the decision beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Just helping you prioritize where you spend your time.
Exactly.
So here's the harvest advisor. We can type in our target grain moisture, the corn price, so then it can give us a calendar view of each of our fields. Right here again, we can see all of the 10 pro fields. It says harvest approaching on 2 of your fields in the next week, so it's tracking the grain moisture. You can go into the details, which is on the next screen. So on Dad's farm again, you can see on the calendar up in the top left of each day is the percentage of the grain moisture, and then in the bottom right here it just shows what the drying cost is going to be. So as you go through these days, you can see the grain moisture going down and the drying cost going down. So that blue day on the 15th is the recommended harvest date. So last advisor we're going to talk about is the revenue advisor. Basically what this is, it's taking the corn, the soybean projected yield, and it's combining the two into the whole entire operational revenue. And then it's looking at the profit chance percentage. So if you just look down here, you can see the field list, where you have your input costs typed in, and then it's projecting your revenue, so then it kind of shows you how much of a chance you have of making a profit on that field. Just something you can look at for making equipment decisions or whatever during the year. You can kind of see maybe how much money you're gonna have in your bank account. Like I said, this is weather advisory, and we're going off weather simulations. Obviously, our Lord and Creator is in total control of what our yield is going to be. But I guess, in my opinion, I mean, with all these products we've talked about, I guess it takes your weather risk to a minimum by giving you advice on what to do because of the weather. And there's really no other product out there at this time that does anything of that sort. So, I mean, I think you can hardly go wrong with it at this point, just because they're basically giving it away. You can play around with it, see how it benefits your operation. Depending on how you currently manage your farm, it may benefit others more than others. So they're also going to have the market trends off here to the side. Like you mentioned earlier, I mean, they're able to see the crop health across the entire country. So I think market trends comes into play there. I also see a lot of benefit off into the future with the crop insurance side maybe coming into play here with the revenue. If we can tie together the crop insurance with this to say, you know, if we get such and such a yield, this is what our payment is going to be. So I think, again, it's still in its infancy, and I think there's going to be a lot of future expansion onto these advisories. So this right here is just kind of a brief overview of everything we have talked about. I know it's a lot of information, and maybe to some, Climate Basic looks sophisticated enough, but I think you can't go wrong with at least just trying it, play around with it, see how you can make it benefit your operation. It's probably the most advantageous for the larger farmers, farming thousands and thousands of acres, but I think it still has a place for the smaller farmer. Maybe a lot of cases, maybe you have another job that you're trying to work and you really don't have much time to be scouting fields or whatever. I just think this helps make you as efficient as possible and helps you prioritize where you need to be spending your attention. So these items up here are basically all part of Climate Basic, just so you can kind of understand it, and it's on your sheet as well. It's just showing the differences between Climate Basic and the Climate Pro. So all these above bullet points are in Climate Basic, and then all these advisories are part of Climate Pro. So Climate Basic is just giving you the weather information. Climate Pro is interpreting that data for you and giving you advice on what to do. This here goes back to the point we made earlier on how they're coming up with $100 per acre of increased profitability. As I mentioned, nitrogen is probably about the biggest potential, because it has a huge impact on the corn crop. Right down here is that website I was talking about, where you can find the details of this value creation climate.com/products/research. We hope to do some testing with this. We still haven't figured out for sure how we're going to do it, but do some testing on some fields using pro recommendation versus not, just to see what kind of a payback there is.